Again, you might be able to tell by the presumably split screen, depending on how Skype records this thing. I'm not 100% sure, and this always goes disastrously for us, but that's how we get by. You might be able to tell that I have a guest. This is my good friend, Danny Michael, who is the curator. You're actually the curator now, right? We can finally say this.
Correct.
Okay, good. You're not the official non-curator whipping boy. You're the actual guy now, right?
That is correct. If you would like, I could use the title that goes from here to the moon, but I won't.
Curators. Oh, is there a full title?
Yes. It is the Robert W. Woodruff Curator of the Cody Firearms Museum at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West.
Oh my God, that's like a proper like Mexican name where they have
I need
names.
3 business cards just to fit it all.
Do you have a business card that says all of that?
I do.
I want one. Anyway, we're here for a reason, which is that Danny. Oh wow, look at that color. Danny, there you go, Armax. Danny is trying to rejuvenate Armax, and you're doing this along with Nick, aren't you?
Yep, we're doing this with Nick Jensen-Jones of Helios Publishing and a few other venues, but we're primarily working with him through that, and he's our publisher on the journal.
Nice. Now, the Armax journal is one that I actually have managed to get a couple of old copies of because I wanted very specific data that was available only in these tomes, and it took me a little bit of work to even track them down because this was not like the highest circulation publication ever made. But
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it was originally meant to be and how it started? Because it's been offline for a while now, right?
Yeah, so the original Armax was a journal from the Cody Firearms Museum, and it was first published in 1987.
First year.
Yeah, so you got a first year. Hard to find.
This is the notorious first year, right?
Yeah, it is. And we can talk about why it's notorious in a minute. But yeah, it was started in 1987 by our former curator, Herb House, who's one of the premier authors on Winchester, and recently passed away, unfortunately, just a couple of years ago. But he started the journal and really wanted to make it a place to publish about the museum, publish academic work about firearms, because he was always frustrated by sort of the lack of academic venues. He ran it until about 1995 when they published the last issue, which is volume 6. And it seems to me that it was mostly it was his baby and something that he tried to really push forward. And then, anybody doing something like that on their own will eventually burn out. And it did. And now we're trying to bring it back. He had proposed to Ashley and myself a number of times while he's still alive to bring it back. And we always wanted to, but we were smack dab in the middle of the renovation. And now we had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, you waited till he was gone and couldn't enjoy it, and then you
just really spit all over the legacy.
It's a really no. It's not the legacy because now there is a legacy, so you can uphold the legacy. Just the man himself, he can deal. Right. To be fair, that's the most you can hope for, right? That somebody was influential enough to spark someone else. Because I can assume that the way these were created is that it was the hope of creating user-submitted, peer-reviewed data, sort of a more professional type of data to firearms research. Because we've talked about this before, firearms research tends to be like military, and firearms research tends to be the redheaded stepchild. Mm-hmm. People want to almost forcibly recontextualize it and apply all these other things to it that really don't have anything to do with engineering history or just sort of the evolutionary history of design, or even just the archiving of certain features and things. Like very hard nuts and bolts history often gets ignored in our field by what you would call sort of the more lettered histories. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, I just generally call it the academic history. And like you said, those venues want to put a lot of baggage, attach a lot of baggage to firearms history. And so...
Which, by the way, that can be fair as an analysis, but the problem is, how do you do that sort of second-tier impact analysis when you don't have the nuts and bolts? And you're just completely willing to ignore the nuts and bolts. Like, it's almost like just... arms become this amorphous thing in history, and they don't really get into the details of what was going on or why it was going on.
Yeah, and that's what happened. And Herb's vision, like you said, I think he was trying to get past that. And there's some really amazing material in the first run of Armax, in that original run. There's articles that you can't find anybody else talking about it anywhere, and you have to track down the Armax to find any sort of discussion on it. And now they've been out of print for over 2 decades. They're really tough to find. But the only serious article I've ever seen on the Winchester revolvers is in Armax. The only serious article that mentions the Burton machine rifle is in Armax.
Oh.
There's stuff that you can't get anywhere else in these, and now they're just nearly impossible to find. So one of the reasons we wanted to bring it back was to reestablish a venue to publish peer-reviewed scholarly articles on firearms history. And another one was, hopefully down the road, we have ambitions to maybe reprint some of these, but that's step 4 or 5, and we're still on 1.
Well, I'm looking at these old ones, and let me take a look at the. It looks like it's Hose writing most of the articles himself, and trying desperately to bring in. I see Carr wrote one in here, and I imagine he probably had to fight like hell to get somebody else to submit something to the manuals. I feel like poor Hose was ahead of his time, because every time you talk to me about him or I run into his notes, he seems like a deep skeptic, the kind of man that would like to apply a more fundamental sort of scientific process to the research of these sorts of things, something that I tend to prefer myself to. And yet we let a lot of lore get to the head of our research. And it's very often in arms history that we just lack data, and we run with a story that's being retold, and we don't go looking for the root of it. And it seems like he's the kind of man that liked going to the root of the data. And I imagine that's, again, what the reboot is supposed to be about, is to actually let people do proper research and open themselves up to questioning and review, and to make sure that it's all, I'm looking here at the new one, and look at the references. Like, this is 2 pages. I'm sorry, this is probably hard for you guys to make. 2 pages of references for one article. And I don't think this is all. I think this goes, 3rd, 4th, 5th. I'm looking at 6 pages, 5.5 pages of reference notes for one article in this journal. So this is very well proved out. You can walk down every claim in it, right?
Yeah, and we're trying to adopt a really, a really consistent standard on how we cite things, and encourage our authors that the stuff needs to come from primary and secondary material. It's not just something that we're repeating a bunch of secondary sources. We're trying to get past those into primary original research.
Right.
So yeah, and we're trying to source it as thoroughly as we can, and encourage the authors to as well.
All right. So before we get into talking about how this kind of came back around, I'm going to sort of put this here in the middle, and then I guess again at the end. How do people get this? Like, where do we go? What do we do?
Yeah. So if you have already been piqued in your interest by the first few minutes of this conversation, you can go to armaxjournal.org/subscribe. And the good news is, if I imagine some of your audience is at least maybe members of either the Royal Armories or the Cody Firearms Museum. If you're a member of either of those institutions, you can get a discount on subscriptions. I don't know what you have to do for the Royal Armories ones. You'll probably have to message them. But for us, if you call our membership office, they can provide you a discount code if you are a member, or if you sign up to become a member. So
okay. And then the money from that obviously goes to producing more of this, more peer review, more.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So the money that you're purchasing this is covering our cost of production, and to fund the next edition, so that we can pay, to have these edited, printed at a high quality, use color photography, do really cool things. So the money you're spending on this is going straight back into the journal.
Nice. And then the first new edition. So this is the number 1 of the 2021. So this is picking up many years after, because you said these ended in 95?
Yeah, the originals ended in 95 on volume 6, I believe.
Okay.
And we're picking up. So the first one of the new edition is actually labeled volume 7 because we see it as a continuation.
Okay.
So that's our little nod to. That's why if you get one of these and you see volume 7, you haven't missed out. We picked up where the old ones left off because we wanted this to be.
It says volume 7, number 1.
Yes. What did I say?
No, it says volume 7. You said volume 7.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it says volume 7, number 1.
So, and that's because originally our intention is to publish these twice a year.
Okay. I'm on it now.
So yeah, each year should have 2 volumes. And originally that's what they did, although later they condensed it to 1 per year. But our intention is to publish 2 volumes annually.
Okay, that makes more sense. I got lost for a second because I was like, wait, how can there be volume 7, number 1 if they were a standalone? So this one was spring 2021, but it's going to be obviously the only one for 2021 right now because of probably the same difficulties everybody's been having in 2021.
Yeah, so originally we were planning to do 2 in 2021. Because of a number of delays, we're on the spring edition is in the warehouse now, just about to ship. So if you've already
these are available.
Yeah, so if you've already subscribed, they should be en route soon. And if you're listening to this, they are at the warehouse. So it's not like we're announcing these and they're in production. They have been produced. And the first batch has arrived.
Is there any inventory left over that if you subscribe now, you can get in on volume 7, number 1?
Yep. There is lots of room to get in. So hopefully if you subscribe, by the time you hear this, there should still be room to get one.
Yeah. So everybody subscribe. If you have an inkling, go ahead and get one so that you know, because getting this one later is going to be harder, right?
Yeah. And we plan to have available in future digital downloads of single articles. You know, if you're a researcher or subscriber and you just need one, you can do stuff like that. And there will be a volume 7, number 2, that was originally going to be the fall issue. That one is currently in production, and will ship early in the new year. So we're going to keep that calendar year. So we're actually probably going to sneak in 3 next year. But we're going to try and get back on track with the regular 2 a year.
Now, I want to put something out there. I was asked to contribute to this journal, and I said no. Not because I didn't want to, because and I'm very glad I said no, actually, because it turns out I really didn't have the time. This has been a rough year. But Danny told me he was rebuilding Armax, and because I had read previously, what Othais said is the standard, I went, I ain't got no time for that. Because as much as I do heavy research, I mean, I guess I could kind of convert one of my episodes, but that feels I'd like to do some primary. So I have a project in the back of my mind that I'd like to do, but I'm going to have to get my citations together and I'm going to have to work on it slowly. So I would like to submit, and I will as soon as I can. But I knew that there was no way to get what is a proper article in this journal together, because the standard on this is very high. And as a matter of fact, holding this one in my hand, I feel like you've raised the stakes compared to the old ones even. Because Othais knew what he was thinking, so he didn't have to. I know he wanted peer review. He didn't necessarily have it because he was sort of this one man shouting into the void. And now you've really run with his vision. And I'm looking at this first volume, and the first of the new volumes, and I'm seeing. Let's see some of these names here. We've got Mel Carpenter. We've got Jonathan Ferguson. Some of you may know that name. I've got Matthew Moss. Those of you who are friends of mine probably know Matthew. He's a friend of mine. We've got Ashley Hiblinski, never heard of her. And then let's see, there's some notes and stuff. Christoph Nagy, Matthew Williamson from over in the Netherlands, I believe. And then there's some book reviews in here as well, which is awesome to see. So this is already probably more diverse in this first volume than all of the previous ones, as far as I understand it. I mean, maybe not quite, but you're getting close right off the bat, aren't you?
Yeah, there was a stretch where Herb was able to get a few more authors involved, but I don't know that he ever had the peer review system set up. Like you said, he really moved that thing forward through just sheer willpower for as long as he could. And yeah, we have a really good crew. I'm really happy with the first set of authors that we have, and on our editorial staff. And we're able to achieve that. So every article was a double-blind peer review, even in this first one, and will be going forward. So
it's going to have to be double-blind because I know how many of these people know each other at this point.
Yeah. So we're doing blind peer review.
What a lot of people don't know is that Danny and I have been part of a subgroup that Ian McCullum over at Forgotten Weapons and myself, I reached out to him a couple of years ago, and I said, we all know these same people in these loose ways, but we really need to organize a group where at least people can get linked together, because sometimes researchers don't know of each other. They might know you through a hub, but it's like I'm constantly getting asked, do I know a guy that knows a guy? And so we put together a group that merged curators and researchers of significant effort, by the way. I know a lot of you guys would love to get in there and sort of see what's being discussed, but you really want to be a detailed primary source researcher or sitting on top of a massive proper arms collection, but if you happen to be one of those people that haven't found us yet, reach out to me. But through this part, we've all gotten to know each other a lot better in terms of what people have access to and what they know and don't know. And it's interesting to see the same names mostly turning up here, because it tells you that the integration is starting to become very productive. So I'm really excited to see this. I would like it to have the sort of financial backing of the community so that everybody has access to this sort of quality of material. And also, if you're the kind of person that's sort of casually into this, or you want to get more, I've had some people talk to me recently about wanting to do their own research and get into it. If you're looking for a way to sort of stay involved, reading this sort of material to understand the standard, and then even reaching out, talking to or assisting with this kind of thing, there's always windows to do this sort of work. And then participating in something like this is a very, very good way to prove your worth in terms of being able to do actual research. So I'm pretty excited about the idea of it. I think this could be a very good unifying force for sort of the research community.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're like, I really want to write for something like this, I want to write on that level, or I have material ready to go. You can reach out to us at the website and or email me at the museum and get in touch, and we can we have room for plenty of researchers. We want to expand this field as well. And if you're somebody that's new to the field, where some of the article formats we're keeping open are especially for like new professionals or emerging professionals in the history world. So we definitely want to make some entry points for people that are out there doing research that we don't know yet.
Yeah, there's always going to be new material and new people emerging, and from who knows where. Like, I didn't come out of an academic background, and I just started compiling data, and I have a certain amount of respect now, and it's all just from doing the work. And if you're the kind of person that wants to do the work, you may have that opportunity as well. And even if you're not, you can at least see people applying the work and really get down to the truth of some of this research material. So, Danny, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have a favorite article from the new journal?
Probably for me, seeing Matt's article on Winchesters in World War I come to fruition, because he came to the museum and did a lot of research in the archive, and I talked to him a lot about that research. And so to see that come out and come to fruition was pretty cool. So I'll go with that one as a favorite.
Ooh, does he talk about the exploding ant? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I don't know if he talks about that one, but and that's the other thing that I'm really proud of, the journal that's in print right now and the one that's that we're in production on. The diversity of articles I'm really, really happy with, because the original Armax, Herb was mostly writing out of the Winchester collection, which is totally valid. A lot of museums publish journals like that.
Well, there's certain Winchester data that I can only get out of these. But to be fair, when you're a researcher, you can really only do, like, you only get to pick so many specialties, because it takes years to build up a sort of a thing that you know well,
Yeah, and and that's what he knew well, and that's what he worked out of, and that's where the articles came from, was mostly the museum's own holdings. But in this one, we're sort of calling ourselves the Journal of Contemporary Arms, and we're identifying that as like early to mid 19th century to present. So, there's an article on Winchesters, and then there's an article on AK-74s. In a future one, the breadth of stuff is, I think we're filling a gap that has, there's the Royal Army's journal that is Arms and Armor, and they cover a certain niche we're trying to go a little bit beyond that, not to compete with them, but to, really complement it, and give room for some more modern things.
So, by the way, the articles in this issue include the MB Associates, rather, M1 Silent Pistol and Javette projectiles. And so a lot of you, well, I don't know how many of you know about Javettes, but it was interesting to see it all compiled into one place with excellent color photos and examples. And I'm not going to flip this book around. I'm going to make you all, have to go look it up.
I appreciate that.
Jonathan Ferguson pulled from his own recent work, so the operational trials of the EM2 automatic rifle in Malaya. And then, obviously, you mentioned Matthew Moss's Winchester repeating arms exports to foreign powers during the First World War. And the other article that I found very interesting, actually, in this one was Ruger's old model single-action revolvers, which does not sound like an exciting title. But this is by Ashley Hiblinski. And she was talking about the modifications to Colt single-action armies made to avoid litigation in the U.S. because of the old story of like carry 5 and leave an empty 6, right? Yeah. And so that caused a mechanical change, I believe, in the 50s. I'm ruining myself for how well I read this. But that some countries, particularly Ruger, but others, would make changes to the guns in order to account for how terrible people handle their firearms. Now, what I find very interesting is I read that article, and then 3 weeks later, somebody shot somebody else with an 1873, and everybody's speculating wildly, and I'm sitting here going, I wonder which version of the 1873 he actually had, because now I know there's a number of them, depending on manufacturer and time period, that have transfer bars or floating firing pins or who knows what in there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a huge, it seems like a really technical thing to think about, but when you think of the number of single action clones that have been made since World War II and how that impresses on us what we think of single actions, even though they're different from the originals.
I would argue that there's been more single action armies made after World War II than there were before 1900 by a long shot.
By a
orders of magnitude. So it's just funny, but you think about it, there might be more transfer bar versions than there are normals, but it's hard to say because then, Colt kept making the normal version. So it was interesting to see a breakdown of one and why it came about and what they were worried about. And so even something as simple as that can be found in this new little journal. So also, you have a lot of confidence in your readers, because I noticed the old Armaxes are in sort of a brown paper bag texture. Yeah. This new one is bone white. Look at that. Yeah. I have greasy hands. This is not going to last, Danny. I feel like you set me up for failure here. That's all I'm saying.
We were trying to pretend that we were part of the ivory tower of academia.
No, you're the eggshell tower.
Yeah, that is definitely eggshell.
But so what was your role in all this before we wrap? I don't want to bore everybody to death, but where did this come back up? Who brought this idea back to light?
So this was Ashley and I had talked about this before I stepped into the curator role at the museum, and then I took my I took her job. Sure. And then I really wanted to, with the renovation complete, and I keep talking about the renovation like people know what I'm talking about, but after the renovation of the CFM in 2019,
So the problem is Danny and I had lots of conversations about the renovation because it's all he did for 2-3 years. And I think our own animator was involved in that to some degree too.
Yeah, we used animations from Bruno.
Yeah, so I'm sorry for whatever's wrong with them, but we just call them back up.
They're great. But once that's completed and I step into the new role, it's like, all right, what am I going to do as curator? And thinking about, I can't just up and renovate the museum. I would get run out of that place very quickly. So I thought, one of the things that I can work on is, and one of the goals of the center as a whole is to contribute to academic study of our various fields. And thinking about the conversations I had with Herb and with Ashley, I then sort of brought the idea to Nick, and he was very enthusiastic about it, and then started working internally to get some buy-in and support. And then 2020 happened, and lots of things got put on hold at the museum. And then we got the green light, and then getting production and shipping and printing and stuff from going in 2021 was its own battle. But yeah, it was thinking about the legacy of Herb and Ashley, and then what I could do to contribute to it, and then finding the right person to help me bring that to life.
And that's Nick, right?
Yeah, and that would be Nick. I am not an editor or a publisher, and I can have an idea, but I need other people to make it happen.
That's fair. Nick's been involved in some other publishing. I don't know how much I'm supposed to know, but anyway, Nick's a delight. But you guys have been cranked. This must have taken a fair bit of work, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a ton of work, and a lot of that goes to Nick and his drive to be one of the hardest working people I know.
To be fair, Nick is an excellent motivator of other people too. Like he can get behind you and be like, "Excuse me, that's not on time." He can remind you of your deadlines quite succinctly, which is good. That's what you want for somebody that's organizing something like this.
No, but I mean, Nick had a vision as well to because he saw the gap too, right? Of that lack of space to publish scholarly works on firearms history and not just talk about firearms sociology. And so him and I, and we've known each other for a few years now. So it was sort of a natural fit. Like it was an obvious choice, and I didn't have to look that hard to find somebody with the talents and drive to bring it back.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep this short-ish. I do want to say one thing to sort of summarize this for people, because I know I'm not sitting here reading an article. Is there sampling of the writing somewhere, or is it just sort of blind going into it?
I don't believe that we have any article previews online.
Once we get to another volume, we probably need to give them a sample of some sort. But let me put it to you this way, in terms of people wondering what they're getting into with this, because it's going to be. This isn't a magazine subscription kind of a thing, right? This is a scholarly journal. It's heavily reviewed. It's very labor intensive compared to a magazine article. I started out when I started collecting. I really liked reading the magazines, the Shotgun News and stuff like that. What drove me to start doing my own research and even eventually turn into my own show was the inaccuracies that I found there, or at least the uncorroborated stuff, like just that flotsam that comes along with a good gun story that gets repeated, and yet you sit there and you go, wait a second, this is almost mutually exclusive with this other thing that I was told. And so if you're the kind of person that has happily read this stuff and never really compared or considered, you're probably not going to like this, because this is higher level. So if you've ever been that sort of person, you might have gone and joined up with like the Winchester collectors. They put out a journal, or the Remington collectors. They put out a journal. And then those tend to be more researched articles, but they're a little bite-sized. So in other words, their collectors will say, hey, I really focused down on this serial block from these years, and this is what I found. That is very accurate, but also quite tiny in focus. And so it can be a little bit too bite-sized, and yet it is very detailed and very good article writing from those journals. I've appreciated those more than I've appreciated the average magazine. This is an entire story in a cited article, proven out very well and very unlikely to have inaccuracies in it. And I say very unlikely because we all know that objective truth is very hard to achieve, even when you have the paper in front of you. There's always a way that you can get turned around on something and you go, oh crap, somehow this meant that. But as close to possible reality as you can possibly get that I know of in a journal is right here. The only thing that exceeds the quality of what is here are very well-researched whole books that you would then have to read the whole book. The problem I find with that, and I know I'm kind of going on a big monologue here, the problem I have with that is with a whole book, you have to spend a lot of money to get one topic that you already know you want to read about. In this case, I would not necessarily have gone to look up Javette projectiles, right? I may not have wanted to go independently look up Ruger old model single-action revolvers. But I would have been drawn in initially by, say, Winchester repeating arms exports, or I would have wanted to read more about Jonathan's trial stuff that I already knew about. But what did I do? I ended up being attracted to the things that I didn't know as well. And so this is a very good way to be a well-rounded person in sort of the arms research field and just sort of start feeling out what people know, what they don't know, what topics you may have never heard of that you may be interested in. And I found it to just be a lot of fun. So if you want to back sort of, if you want to back something that is C&Rsenal, the project that's down into like a journal form and with better citations than C&Rsenal by a mile, this is probably the way to go. So you're going to want to reach out to armaxjournal.org.com/store. But I think subscribe works as well, but it redirected to store. So store is a shorter word. I don't know why you're making me type all these unnecessary letters, if I'm honest, just so that you can sound fancy.
The key to academia is to type many letters, but few letters do trick.
Well, you're in your $10 words.
That's our entire plan.
Thanks for joining me, Danny. I know I teased you about Hose, but I think he'd be very happy to see even this much buy-in on the first one, especially with all the citations, with all the peer review. To me, he seems like a man who is hard after the truth, and I think he'd enjoy it. I'm going to stop this video here, but I am going to make another one. And if Danny tells me that enough of you went and subscribed, we will release a video explaining why volume number 1 is Hose's challenge to the world of, I believe, cults, right?
Yeah.
At that time. And some of you may know from a previous interview with Danny what that means. But this video is stopping right about now. Go check it out.
Thanks.